Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Global COVID-19 Show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this conversation around various aspects of life in the pandemic. Today is a milestone episode number 265. Meet Mark Luckie. He's at Mark S. Luckie on all the platforms. He's a digital strategist and author. His new novel, Valley Girls, is just out. He led media partnerships for Facebook, for Twitter, for Reddit. The former journalist with the Washington Post, the Center for Investigative Reporting, the Los Angeles Times, and Entertainment Weekly. He's been recognized by The Root as one of the most influential African Americans. You'll get a chance to talk to him about various aspects of the pandemic, including the role that Silicon Valley and social media is playing in our lives these days. And also we will hear about his fascinating career and how he is working at the intersection of tech, journalism, and civil rights. Please tell your friends about the show, and he will join us in just a minute. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Please share on any of those platforms or all of those platforms, and please tag a friend. They can watch live or watch later, as the replay will start as soon as we are off the air. I'm Sree, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. We would love to work with you on any virtual events that you're thinking about. You can find us at digimentors.group. Digimentors.group is our website, or you can email me, sree@sree.net. We do conferences, summit, webinars, talk shows, all of that we do, and we'd love to talk to you about it. And if you haven't seen this show before, the show has been going since last March. We went for 250 days in a row, and then we switched to a weekly or twice a week cadence. And we've had more than 1 million viewers, more than 450 guests from 73 cities and 20 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. You can find our archives at youtube.com/Sreenet. We're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. We're very grateful to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please follow them on Twitter. Are you ready to talk about technology, civil rights, journalism, media, writing a novel, and more? Well, I am, and our guest, Mark Luckie, is going to help us navigate all these topics. So please say hello to Mark Luckie, digital strategist, author. His new novel is Valley Girls, and we will show you his website and get lots of insights from this conversation. So let me bring onto the stage Mark Luckie, and here we go. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Sree. How are you?
I'm doing well. My question to you is the question I've asked on all 265 episodes. How are you? Where are you? And how is your family doing through the pandemic?
Listen, I have had a great 2021 so far. So many amazing things have happened. New book, as you mentioned, being able to be in Atlanta, Georgia, where I am now. It's much more, there's lots of trees, which I appreciate during a pandemic. And my family is doing great. My family is an artistic family. So we know how to keep ourselves busy in the creative arts during times like this.
So tell me a little bit about Atlanta. I always think of it as Hotlanta. What is it like in the winter?
It is freezing Atlanta. It is not New York snow. It's not slipping on ice or anything like that. But the beauty of it is that you can drive through the snow. You can play in the snow. You don't have to worry about the yellow or the black snow. Things like that. I just really love the city because it is very congenial. Before the pandemic, people open up their homes to you. You know, I get last minute calls that say, you know, hey, I'm going to cook for a few friends. You come over, there's 20 people and there's, you know, a full buffet platter situation. So it's a great city to be in.
Well, that's great to hear about, and we should tell everyone that you've been my digital guru for many years since
You've
you
been mine.
wrote a landmark book about digital strategy for journalists, and it was called the Digital Journalism Handbook.
Yes.
And then you had an awesome title, which was editorial innovations editor at the Washington Post.
Yeah.
And then from there, you went on to an incredible career leading media partnerships at Twitter, and then at Facebook, and then at Reddit. And then you've been an independent consultant, working at the intersection of journalism, tech, and civil rights.
Yes.
And in the middle of all of this, you find time to write two novels. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about the novel first, and then we'll talk about all those other great things you've been doing.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've had a long history within Silicon Valley, the latter half of my career, and I've seen some great things. I've seen a lot of not so great things. And so we know that tech, social media touches everyone's lives, but most people don't know how the companies actually work behind the scenes. Being someone who has been in some of the higher conference rooms with higher ups and execs, and being at the forefront of working with press and outside influencers, I wanted to put all that into a book. And it is a novelization of time in Silicon Valley, seen from the perspective of people who work in comms. And the comms people are the silent ninjas, I call them, working behind the scenes. Anytime a scandal hits, these people are, most of them women, working behind the scenes to make these scandals go away. And so it's a really, really compelling book, if I do say so myself. One of the things I got from when I was pitching the book, they said it was, a lot of people said it was, the editor said it was too long. I was like fearful. I was like, when it came out, oh no, this is going to be too long. I have gotten feedback from people that they finished it in a day, 2 days. It's just really that compelling. And just like Silicon Valley, things get worse and worse and worse. And it really gives people a behind the scenes look of how do you deal with the good and, like I said, the not so good. And
I'm showing a page from one of my favorite vanity domain names of all time, getlucky.net, Luckie. And we said that you can find Mark on all the socials as Mark S. Luckie. And so what was this like writing it from the point of view of a female executive?
Yeah, so it was one of the things that I grappled with the most when I was writing was I am writing from a female perspective, but I myself obviously am not a woman. And so I worked with about, I'd say 30 to 40 women in and out of Silicon Valley, understanding their perspectives, what they went through, things that I didn't know, things that they wanted to communicate with the world. And so I saw this because I've been vocal about the ins and outs of Silicon Valley, seeing myself as an ally, as a conduit for them to share their stories, but also recognizing that the book is more so about intersectionality. What if you read this book, you're going to have a very different experience if you're a woman versus a man, if you're Black versus Indian, if you are a LGBT or you're not, if you speak Spanish or you don't. You're just going to have a completely different experience. And that's what's so wonderful about this, is that from pulling different perspectives, I was able to add gravitas, details, realness to the book, which I'm very, very proud of.
And when you first thought of this book, was the idea that it would be a female protagonist from the beginning, or did you come to that later in your realization of what you wanted to?
Yeah. Well, it's going to sound weird, but I didn't have a choice, because if I'm telling the story from the comms perspective, most of the people who work in tech and comms roles are women, and a very specific kind of woman, mid to 20s, a great background, familial background, usually upper middle class. And for me to make that a male character, even to have male characters being centered in this book, would have been untrue to the realities. And so when I was working in Silicon Valley, I would work alongside these women. I was always fascinated because they're usually like the most congenial people in the world. You want to hang out, grab a drink after work, that kind of thing. But you get them in a boardroom on a call with media, or having to deal with government officials. Man, they're going to cut you. And so it's really that sort of dynamic that is played out in the book that I wanted to communicate their experiences and what they have to go through.
And congrats on doing that. And I'm looking forward to hearing how it continues. It just came out, right? The book is out just
came out last month. Yeah.
And are you, we all know how difficult it was to promote a book last year. So you skipped 2020. What is it like to do promotion in 2021?
2021 is hard, man. I have to tell you. So I did the initial promo, but in terms of virtual book tours and even I was supposed to get a billboard in Times Square, which is really, really cool, especially for someone who's lived in New York. We've had to partition that off into the early spring. So my editors have calmed me down and they're like, books don't just disappear. I just thought books don't have a shelf life, ironically. So, being able to let the world calm down a little bit to sort of get ourselves together for 2021. I think that I've had to make adjustments, as everyone has, but at the same time, this book has brought a lot of comfort to people, being able to see their experiences in it, and so it's good, and it is something that the 2021 will always be crazy, but thankfully there'll always be scandals in tech, so this book will not lose its luster. And
so you'll get a chance to talk about it for years to come. And we'll talk about those scandals and what's going on in Silicon Valley and your views on everything from Facebook to Twitter to Reddit to Instagram. And we'll do that in just a minute. First, let's just say hello to folks who are watching from around the world. Everyone, tell us where you're watching from. And if you have a question for Mark, please ask it now or ask it later in the comments. We start with Jonathan Borstein, who's watching from the East Village and has watched 265 episodes in a row. If you can, even I can't believe it. I don't think I've watched 265 episodes. I checked out for some of these, but
they're great though. I can't blame them, right?
Well, thank you, Jonathan. And let me ask you a favorite memory of the East Village.
Favorite memory of the East Village. I remember being, I think it's the Gratitude Cafe, and that was featured in the movie Rent. I love movies. I love filmmaking. I love being on sets and see something that was really that iconic. That had been a long time hangout in the area for a long time, but something that was so tied to a movie that I love. I remember it being one of my earliest memories, and I remember thinking, this is the New York I came here for. To be a part of something bigger than myself. And so I love New York. I miss it a lot, and my love to the people who were there.
All right. Roman is watching from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Have you been?
Yeah, I actually have a quick story. It's where I got the idea for my second book. I was sitting poolside in Santo Domingo drinking Cuba Libres, and I was reading Junot Diaz. And I was like, man, he is really capturing his whole culture. And it gave me the idea, like, what's my culture? Historically Black colleges. And so I started scribbling literally on a napkin. Got on the plane back to the U.S. and I kept scribbling. And 3 years later, my first novel was out. So yeah.
And that was Do You. That was your. And you had a great marketing campaign. I still remember the tchotchkes you used to promote the book. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. There are very few novels actually about historically Black colleges. And as someone who went to Bethune-Cookman University in Florida, and I just found out this week, again, blessings in 2021, that I was accepted to Howard University. I'm going to be getting my executive MBA, which I'm excited about. And so being able to tell the story of HBCU students was amazing. I was also blessed to be a finalist for a Lambda Literary Award for it. It centers a lot on LGBTQ issues, which is another thing that's not talked about within the Black community within literature. And so it was much more daunting to write, and I swore I'd never write a book again. But here we are on book number 3. So I'm trying to remind myself, hey, before you think about book number 4, just take a breath. think about life. Think about coming up for air sometimes, right?
And it feels to me like maybe, I've not written a book, but it feels to me like it might be like childbirth. You forget, and therefore you take on another book project.
Yes.
And it seems to me, though, Mark, that HBCUs, historically Black colleges, universities, are having a moment that I have not experienced in my lifetime. In 40 years of following academia or so, I've not noticed as much attention, interest, and support. Doesn't mean everything is going great within HBCUs, but it feels like a moment.
Yeah, it very much is, because historically Black colleges have been around for over a century, and they're almost like the best kept secret, I'd say, in the Black community, in that it is much more of a familial environment. You have professors who know your name, who are rooting for you, who are going to kick you in the butt if they find out that you're not doing well in their class. They really take on students who need that boost. Obviously, there's a great range of students at more than 100 HBCUs, but once you're an HBCU grad, you almost feel like you're a part of this network. It's a big, big extended family. And so there's a lot of pride in it. And I'm glad that the world is able to share in that pride, because these are wonderful institutions that are graduating some of the best Black doctors, nurses, people across multiple industries. And I'm very proud to have gone to one and to be going to another one, Howard University, starting this summer.
And Howard's a wonderful place. I did a social media day of training there a couple of years ago. And Mark, you've done multiple projects with me where you've taught me and others social media. You were a speaker at Social Media Weekend when we first did this, and we're going to be doing it again this year. So thank you for all the teaching you've been doing. But it's great to know you're going to go back and get an MBA. I felt like you already got an MBA in all the places you worked, but it's going to be interesting to see you do the executive MBA at Howard University. Speaking of Howard, we've got to acknowledge that an alum of the Howard University and HBCUs is the Vice President of the United States.
Isn't that crazy? That's awesome.
Yeah. So the fact that I think one of my favorite pictures of the last year was Vice President Harris and then Senator Harris in a photo with her fellow bison, as the Howard University students are known and alumni are known, Chadwick Boseman. And you could see them both, their pride and being at the pinnacles of their careers. And of course, we lost Chadwick this past year.
Yeah, and the number of Black people, the most influential Black people in the world, passed through the doors of Howard University. And so that definitely played a role. And I had already started going through the process before Kamala Harris was announced as the new VP. So it almost became like this added bonus. It's like, I'm going to the same school as the Vice President of the United States. That's really cool, you know?
Can you reflect for a moment? I know you care deeply about civil rights and where America is going. Talk for a minute about that particular glass ceiling being broken. There are ways in which we can get too caught up in individual successes, as we did, as you remember, with President Obama. People said, "Oh, that's the end of racism in this country because we have a Black president." And in fact, it turned out to be, as we all know, with the start of the Tea Party and birtherism and everything else, the start of something rather than the end of something.
Yes, I think we're still in an age of firsts, where first Black this, first Black that, and even beyond Black people, where follow award shows. Like I said, I love movies, and the fact that we're still having first Asian American this and first woman to do that. I mean, it's really incredible that we still have these strides to make across all facets of life. I think where we're at is that people understand what the concerns are when it comes to diversity, to civil rights. People know, and Black people in particular, what we're striving for. It really becomes just sort of accepting and understanding. I feel like more people need Black friends so they can really understand where we're coming from, and the historical nature of the oppression that we had to go through, and why we do have to be so vocal. I mean, things don't change in the world unless people speak up, and so I feel the weight of that in the work that I do. And so that's why I'm exceptionally vocal about making sure that there's diversity in tech, making sure that civil rights organizations have the tools, the tech tools that they need to be able to do their work. Because giving people a voice is, I think, the most important thing that we can do as a society.
Well, I'm going to make sure before we go, we talk about some of your recommendations for movies and TV shows that we
Yes.
should be watching, because I know you are abreast of all pop culture.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And so I look forward to doing that before we go. So let's get into it. Tell us about your story of what happened at Facebook. You were leading media partnerships there, and then all of a sudden you became part of the news. So talk to us about that.
So I came into Facebook in 2017 as the strategic partner manager for global influencers. And parentheses, that wasn't in my official title, because I was working with diverse partners. So essentially, when I came into Facebook, Facebook works with the top names across multiple industries. We're talking about politicians, celebrities, talent, musicians, sports. But if you looked at the roster of people that Facebook worked with, it was not diverse at all. I actually had one of the assistants on the team download a list of every single partner that we worked with, and I was just shocked, like seeing it, that the diversity just was not there. And so the problem with that is the inequity built into the system, where because there's a lack of cultural awareness, because the staff is very homogenous, then that's translating to the partners that Facebook was working with. And so I came in and was like, okay, we're getting partners, and we're getting diverse partners into these creator programs that we're doing. We're putting them in beta testing. We're giving them finances to be able to create their own shows on things like Facebook Watch and IGTV. We're getting people verified. We're, if they have hacked accounts, we're going to help resolve that. We want to give people the tools that this other basically homogenous group has. And so I was doing very well. The thing about me is I'm very good at time management. And so I'm able to do a lot more in a short amount of time than most people are, just because that's how my brain operates. And so I was doing really, really exceedingly well, forging partnerships where they hadn't been before, getting a lot of internal praise for the work that I was doing. For Black History Month, for example, I had 27 different projects that I was working on simultaneously, ended up getting an award from my team for the work that I was doing. But I found as I was going on that there was resistance to the work that I was doing, that I was getting less budget than other people were getting. I was getting more resistance. I got more people sort of saying, no, you can't do that. But my colleagues are able to do certain things and more. And then you add on top of that Facebook as a company is not diverse at all. Everyone sees the diversity numbers. And so the Black people at the company sort of flock to each other to create a community, because there's this through line of, we're facing discrimination, we're facing harassment, microaggressions, all these sort of things. So you need to create your own community to be able to sustain your happiness, to be able to continue doing the work that you're doing. And so it's hearing, and because I was successful, and because I'm talking to all these people who are now looking to me and saying, hey, you were able to accomplish a lot in your job. Like, how do you do it? And Sree, I tell you, like every week, I was talking to, if not at least one person, 2 to 3 people every week from across the company. Hey, can I get coffee with you? Who were Black people who were trying to excel, who were trying to push through this systematic discrimination. And I had moved out to the Bay Area, and my neighborhood was not diverse at all. I had some run-ins with the police, just sort of like hanging around. I was like, listen, I have changed my life completely for this company, but I can't uproot my life and then face resistance from the company that I work with. You guys hired me to do this job. I'm doing it very, very well, but I'm being penalized for it, as a lot of Black people were. And so, as I was walking out the door, I wrote a memo about Facebook and its relationship with not only Black employees but Black users, and how that the discrimination was translating in between both. And I knew that people would feel strongly about it. I didn't realize how strongly. It ended up getting covered by literally every major news organization in the world, because no one was talking about this as openly as I had. And so when I wrote it, I was in the process of moving, and so I like hit send, and I went back to unpacking moving boxes. I opened up my email, and I had 50 reporters in my email asking to talk. I was like, oh no, what have I done? But it ended up setting the foundation for a lot of people within the industry to speak their truth, to talk about what's going on in their lives. A lot of the people, the Black people in tech who have spoken up, have reached out to me privately and said, your memo inspired me to talk up about what I was going through. And so it created, I don't want to say I was the epicenter of this, but it did create a ripple effect for change when it came to race in tech. And I would say one last thing, which is that I was inspired by other people who came before me. Ellen Powell, who worked at Reddit, Susan Fowler, who worked at Uber. And so there is a sort of long dynasty of people who are working to affect change within tech.
And so what are some of the things that Facebook has done since then to fix its problems, if it has in fact done that?
Yeah, so it has done a civil rights audit to find out where the missed opportunities are, where the faults are. They moved Maxine Williams, who's the head of diversity, so that she reports directly into Sheryl Sandberg. They recently hired a VP of civil rights. But Facebook, as we know, continues to falter, especially in this strong political climate where misinformation is being spread rampantly, and people of color and people from diverse groups are having their content taken down at exceedingly high rates versus the people who are coming from conservative or alt-right camps. So Facebook has done these things that sometimes, in my perspective, feel like window dressing, and we're not seeing exactly the results that we should. And unfortunately, the company has a history of putting money towards the problems that it itself has created. So the outcome of how they change, it remains to be seen.
And the problems you described, though, go beyond Facebook, right?
Oh, for sure.
Lots of companies in Silicon Valley have similar issues around diversity and promoting. Diversity is also different shades, right? And different viewpoints and all of that. But the fact is that if you talk specifically about Black and Hispanic executives and funders and founders, you don't see as many as there should be in these elite circles in Silicon Valley, and that needs to change. I can say, being South Asian, that South Asians are represented, kind of they over-index, right? When you have the CEO of Microsoft and Adobe and Alphabet are all Indian men, that that's not the proportion that would be in the United States, and it's great that they're there. But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be opportunities for Black executives, men and women, to have opportunities, Hispanics to have opportunities as well. And that's something that is important. Can you talk a little bit about Facebook's announcement this week that they're going to dial down political content in as an experiment in some countries, including Brazil? To some folks, that's great because that politics has been part of the problem on Facebook. But to others, my God, if they can do that, and just because I agree with it, I'm cheering it on. But what if they then decide to put their thumb on the scale on things that I don't agree with?
Well, the thing is, Facebook is always putting its thumb on the scale and has been for the better part of its existence. And I think that since Facebook has been chasing after meaningful social interactions for the last couple of years, that it wants people to have essentially positive experiences on the platform, that the political climate, not just in the U.S. but around the world, has skewed toward the negative. It becomes combative a lot of times. You know, you're arguing with your mom or your aunt about politics, or you see this inflammatory story, and it increases your negative perception of Facebook. So obviously they don't want that. And so this also pleases government officials who have like a keen eye on Facebook. The company is in its crosshairs, that it is basically putting out misinformation or it's allowing misinformation to circulate, I should say, at a very astounding rate. And so in order to deflect some of the attention, I think they are testing out these changes, making announcements so that people know that it's happening. And I'll say from personal experience, a couple of years back, I had pulled back on the amount of Facebook that I used because I was tired of seeing police brutality in my feed. I was tired of seeing news stories about a certain president and what he was doing. And so it makes sense to at least try this out. We will see if it benefits the users as much as it benefits the company. But as long as we don't skew toward an outright ban on political conversation, I think that extreme is the absolute wrong way to go. But it is something that probably should be explored at some point.
Facebook, as you know, has indefinitely suspended Trump, while Twitter has permanently banned Trump. Do you think that Facebook will follow suit, or do you think that Twitter's decision was the wrong one?
I think that Twitter has taken really bold steps in terms of being able to correct misinformation, to increase the safety and security on the platform. Aside from being my favorite employer, my former employer, it has.
I'm going to have you rank all your employers in terms of favorite.
Sure, why not? Put the Washington Post at the top. I mean, those are some fantastic folks. But yes, the work that Twitter has done to be able to create a safe and platform for all people, and it really just comes down to the terms of service that Trump was repeatedly violating the terms of service and causing real world harm. I mean, people are literally getting killed because of the words that he's putting on social media. And so Facebook hasn't taken the extreme step, but what you'll notice is that Facebook only makes changes when other social media platforms do. So if Twitter makes that change, then people are looking at Facebook, and Facebook makes some sort of follow up, some slice of what other social media companies are doing. But I think we've seen that Mark Zuckerberg has been in constant communication with Republican government officials and conservative publications, news publications, and you'll see much more policy that favors them. And we've seen this for a couple of years now. For better or for worse, depends on who you're talking to, but that means that Facebook will get much hotter water for outright banning Trump from being on the platform versus suspending him, which they have for now.
But you expect that they'll have to make a decision either way at some point?
At some point they will, and Facebook really bows to public pressure. Facebook's biggest nightmare is congressional hearings. So if Congress puts, and not just Facebook but all tech companies, having to sit in front of the dais and having to testify, I mean, no, none of them want that. And so the more they can do to avoid scrutiny from the government, and also by extension scrutiny from the public, they're going to do what has to be done, but they're also, in my view, going to do the bare minimum to be able to clear that hurdle.
All right, let's look at some of the comments coming in. Priyanka Singh has got a nice emoji for you. And Antonio Johnson, who's been a guest on our show, he says, great conversation. And he's in Atlanta. And he wrote a book called You Next about the culture of Black barbershops.
It's a great
And
book.
I've got to comment on your beard because I should. The last time I saw you, your beard did not look like that.
No.
This is, I guess, a COVID beard. Is that the right way to describe this?
This is pandemic. I'm at home. Might as well just grow it out. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I haven't seen the barber as much as I'd like to, just for safety reasons. But yeah, the beard it's taken on a life of its own. My friends have insisted that I can't cut it because growing a beard is it's harder once you get up into your 30s and 40s and beyond, you know?
Right. So here, I don't know how clearly people can see how skinny your beard used to be, and how much you've grown it out. So, is that a lot of work to keep it that way?
Very much so. I mean, we're talking about 30 minutes to an hour to get the beard fully prepped, to shampoos and oils and sprays and combing and things like that. And you know, my barbershop appointments are $50 plus nowadays because you got to do the deep conditioning and the sink. And it's like my barber has to take an hour and probably not schedule anybody right against my appointment because it just, the beard needs love. And
so the energy that you may have once put into the top of your head, put into the bottom of your face.
Yeah, for sure, got to.
Here's a comment from CJ Camry. Says Black barbers are the heart of the Black community, and that's certainly the theme of the book You Next by Antonio Johnson. Let's so many other comments coming in. Let's just catch up. Jonathan's reminding me that we're about 4 weeks or so from the first anniversary of this show, which is mind-boggling when you think of what that means. We started the show just after the day when the NBA shut down. You remember that? And Tom Hanks, all happened one night. The NBA shut down, Tom Hanks got sick. And that's when you knew that something serious was happening. Doug Levy says hello from very rainy Northern California, home of Silicon Valley. And our friend Damon Brown, who was a guest on the show 2 days ago, says, hi, Mark. Always respect your influence over the years. Enjoying Valley Girls so far. So,
and Damon's had a book out as well.
Yeah. And you could guys, everybody should go into my archives at YouTube/SreeNet. And you can watch the archive interview with Damon Brown. And Ellen saying hello from New York City. And Damon's coming through from Vegas right now. And Miriam Berkeley is watching from Hell's Kitchen. Is there racial, ethnic diversity among the Valley girls in your book?
So that's another thing that I went back and forth on. If I was to have like super diversity, that would not be accurate as well. So there are 4 main women, 2 are white, 1 is Latina, and 1 is Japanese. And then you also have another person who's tangential to the group who is Chinese. And so one of the biggest questions that a lot of Black readers had was like, why don't you have any Black main characters? You talk about diversity and things like that. And there are 2 sort of secondary characters who are Black, but it would not be accurate to have a whole bunch of Black people in the boardrooms representing the company. So this book, however painful it is a representation, it is an accurate representation of what's going on inside of Silicon Valley.
There was a conscious decision not to insert an extra amount of Black characters because you felt it wouldn't be realistic. And I'm sure as you said, you've gotten questions about that already. And,
yeah.
Let's see. Damon Brown says, writing a book is like having another kid. You forget how hard it was, but appreciate the memories enough to do it again. But you've told us that you're going to wait to do book number 4. Jigar Mehta is tuning in from San Francisco. He says, been enjoying your takeover of David Cohn's subtext thread this week. Please explain.
Yes, so David Cohn is very much along the lines of who you are, an icon, obviously, in terms of innovation in tech. And his platform Subtext allows a one-to-many broadcast through text message. And so what's happening this week is I'm bringing up topics through text message to subscribers. So today we were talking about passion projects. Yesterday, talking about how do you correct growth, how do you help tech companies recognize growth, but also making sure that that growth doesn't impede on the communication of diverse users. Talked a little bit about the book. It's just a really great platform in terms of being able to talk to a lot of people at once and then being able to text me back to give feedback on the conversations.
And David is a former student of mine and a
There you go.
person. So everyone should check out joinsubtext.com and to get in on that conversation. Let's see. Jeanette Ashworth is saying, fascinating guest. I'll have to check out his book. And here's Bob Anthony, who I work with at Digimentors, who says, your efforts remind me of the casual get-togethers Stephen Miller, then of the New York Times, used to organize in his 90s at the big electronic shows in Vegas, because so few of us blacks in tech could meet and commiserate. And Bob is an amazing technology journalist and travel journalist who's been a guest and co-host with me many times. And so he's making that comparison to black folks finding each other in black tech stories, black tech conferences. And you're saying something similar for black folks in tech. In a way, it's kind of sad that from the 90s to now, it's a slightly different industry, but things haven't changed as much as they could or should. Yeah. Are you hopeful, by the way, as you look ahead, the efforts of you and others, that things will get better?
I am hopeful because I think it is tied to finances. So like if black people are speaking up and saying, hey, we're not going to use these platforms anymore, or they're reducing their use of it, black people make platforms. They make or break them. There are a lot of people on Clubhouse now, but Clubhouse started with a heavy black usership who are really driving the conversation around it. We've seen the cycle with Twitter. We've seen it with a bunch of platforms. And so when black people step away and say, okay, we're not going to use this, then people, that's going to change the trajectory of the platform. And even Facebook knew it when I was working there. Black people were 2.5 times more likely to, or engaged on the platform 2.5 times more than other groups. And then Latinos were right behind that with, I think, 1.5. And so that's part of why my role was so critical, is that we have to keep these people on the platform. So unfortunately, it's an unfortunate truth that we have a long way to go, but also I'm very optimistic about the future.
All right, we'll all see how that goes. I have talked and looked at and spent time trying to learn about Black Twitter. Twitter is a platform where trends that Black folks were talking about became trending topics, and that Black folks were driving the conversation on Twitter on a regular basis. They still do it on a regular basis. And that's not something that I think other communities understood or appreciated, the way Black folks drive pop culture in so many different media. I guess not surprising that it happens on social as well.
Well, if I can add to that, when I was working at Twitter, not a whole lot of employees knew what Black Twitter was, which was astounding to me. You ask someone what Black Twitter was, and they'd sort of look at you like you're a crazy person. And so literally when I was there for one of the hack weeks, we created a internal wiki page to explain what Black Twitter was. And we were hanging up signs all around the office. Do you want to know what Black Twitter is? Go to this internal link to educate people. And it was Dick Costello who was leading the company at the time. And so us employees were like, listen, check this out. Check out this research that we've done. This is why this group is so important. And so the company has been leaps and bounds since then. Now you can't say Black Twitter within the company and people not know what you're talking about.
Well, the fact that people within Twitter had to be taught that tells you something about how the larger community would need it as well.
For sure.
All right, let's keep going. So many questions and comments coming in, and Rose Horowitz is tweeting live along with Vandana Menon. So everyone, please follow them. They're my producers. They've worked with me for 265 episodes. We're so grateful to them. And more comments coming in here. Ying Chan is watching on Lunar New Year's Day in Hong Kong. Great conversations. Look forward to reading your books. Ying is legend in journalism circles, and everyone should follow her work as well. Former New Yorker, now living in Hong Kong. There was a question here that I meant to ask. Here's Priyanka saying, at times when social media platforms are forced to get into politics, their expectations for more accountability, so I guess the question is, should the platforms bear responsibility or consumers bear responsibilities for checking information, making sure it's accurate, making sure they're not sharing misinformation, disinformation? Can you talk about that in general, please?
Yeah, I think it's both. And in a perfect world, consumers would check the background on a post, see if a link is correct. But the overwhelming majority of people who click on links on Facebook and Twitter don't actually read them. They just read the actual post. They'll read a headline. And so it's a false expectation to say that users should have this high knowledge of news and what they're consuming. At the same time, the social media companies have a responsibility to not let false news spread. They know the links, they know the websites that are sharing false information. They know who the users are that are spreading this information. I mean, these tech companies have the best algorithms in the world. They know the movement on their platforms, and using artificial intelligence, they can detect, they can shadow ban, they can curb the spread of it. And a lot of times they just choose not to, because what's wild is whether it's a picture of a puppy or it's a violent threat that gets great shares and likes. If it's getting high engagement, it's getting high engagement. And on the surface, there's no difference between the two. And advertising is being put alongside all kinds of posts, and advertising is what's driving the revenue for these companies. And so a lot of times what's happening is that companies are profiting from misinformation, unfortunately. So to do big sweeping overhauls literally would cut their revenue. So it's something to contend with.
And so, but they have to do this, right? And you and others are holding these platforms feet to the fire to make sure they do that.
Yes, the good of society is at stake. The stability of the world is at stake. We've seen what happens when misinformation or violence is able to spread. The Capitol building insurrection. We've seen the Delhi riots. We've seen the action in Myanmar. We've seen how social media companies can fuel the worst parts of humanity. And so there has to be a little bit of morality mixed into the technical.
Sure, and that's something that I hope people are paying attention to. I write a lot about this on my Sunday newsletter, which folks can get on Substack. It's sreenet.substack.com, so hope folks will check it out. We only have a few minutes left with Mark. If you have a question for him, please post it in the comments. We would love to ask him about it. I wanted to go a little bit down memory lane with Mark and show some photos and pictures that we've done together over the years. This is our friend David Clinch, came to Social Media Weekend, and this is his post about you and me getting ready for the next session. This is back in 2013. Wow, that's how long ago that was. And then you put up this formula on the screen. That's my bad handwriting, but your formula, which, I mean, all of this now has changed so much in those years, but this was you're saying, how we could get more followers. Now the percentages and the numbers may have changed, but basically your suggestion back then was, if you want to build your audience, participate, mention people, be human. I remember all of those things you said. What else would you add to the things that we should know about being successful on social?
Yeah, being successful on social from an individual perspective is about being yourself. Now, it used to be about building your personal brand, and you have to identify, like, chuck your personal brand out the window and think about who you are as a person, what you have to communicate. Don't force it. If you found a story, a link interesting, share it and add a personal message. But sharing links just to share them is not necessarily the best way to go. Being a curator will always continue to be important, both on a macro and a micro level. From a business perspective, I think that people need to recognize that social media companies can't be the only destination, that you have to have a 360 holistic approach to online. That in addition to social media, having your newsletter, having video content, making sure that your website is a destination, because if social media companies disappear, they are then, you're left with nothing. And so making sure that your brand is strong off of social media as well as on is going to be very important going forward. And being authentic, hiring the people who know social media that's essential,
And such great advice. You should know that I was teaching multiple classes today at Stony Brook, online, of course, Stony Brook, where I teach. And so I had to be very careful of the mug that you show your students. But now I can turn it around, and this is what the mug says: "We ought to be opening a bottle of wine." It's an Edith Wharton quote, but all day I've been making sure I've been drinking like this. But with you, I can, and our nighttime audience, we can show that mug.
Well, here's the thing. I tend to drink out of red Solo cups, which are usually used for like alcohol and things like that. And people I'll be on a webinar and I'm like, no, I'm not drinking during the day. This is actually just water.
It's not day drinking. The last time we were together in a room was at the Met on the grand stage of the Grace Rainey Auditorium about the conversation about the news, and we had the great Ann Curry with us and Shermeen Chinoy, who has won an Oscar for her documentary work. Lee Moore Tomer was our host at the Met, and there you are. And we had this fabulous conversation talking about social and digital media. And are you surprised how much people are trying to understand these technologies, and how much confusion there still is among them?
Yeah, I think we use these platforms so much, they're a part of our daily lives, that people are now asking questions like, wait, how is this actually built? What are the decisions behind them? I think lay people who are not necessarily engaged in tech or journalism are much more curious about what these large companies are doing behind the scenes. It's a big part of the reason I wrote the book, is to give people this insight into the companies. And so I often have people saying, hey, I have questions about this one issue that I've never heard anyone talk about before. And there's just this level of curiosity. And I have to say that Met event was great. In particular, talking with Ann Curry. Ann Curry is one of the few people who's actually challenged me in my sort of like personal stances in relationship with technology. She grilled me like I was an interviewee, and I was like, "Oh no, Ann Curry just came to talk on the panel." So I'll never forget that interaction.
That's great. One of the things that I want you to just touch upon before we go is talk about what you're thinking about civil rights and technology. What are things that everyone can do, and what big companies can do, small companies, and just as consumers, what can we do to be more to work for equity and justice in civil rights and tech?
Yeah, I think for people who are looking to amplify voices, I think right now a lot of people are falling into the trap of putting diverse people in their commercials or in their ads and their display ads to show representation. I think what's most important is to give voice to give the creators. Give the people who are doing the work, the civil rights organizations, the microphone to be able to speak up and to tell their truth. It's much more authentic. That's what they're asking for, is to be able to have that stage. And so if you're being sincere, that's the way to go. being able to connect with organizations who aren't, the big organization that everyone thinks about, that there are lots of smaller organizations that people should be connecting with. Follow a lot of these people on social media. You're going to get a way different perspective of what's happening on the ground. For example, looking at Fair Fight and what Stacey Abrams is doing there, but also looking at the smaller organizations that have affected change in Georgia. Understanding what's going on in the world, amplifying these voices. If you're an individual, don't be afraid to speak your truth. Make sure that you are doing it in a way so you don't get fired. I'd never recommend that, but make sure that, whatever boundaries you can work within to make sure that you are affecting the world for the better.
Oh, that's a great note to end on. I also want to pull up Damon's quote when you were saying, don't just rely on all these social media platforms. Amen. You have to be your own landlord on these platforms as you try to build your audience. So with that, give us a final thought on why people should pick up Valley Girls.
Yeah, I think...
Wait, hold on.
Oh, okay.
My wife might just walk by and just hear that and wonder what I just said. So why did you pick up the book Valley Girls by Mark S. Luckie?
Yes. Valley Girls, on the surface, if you're just looking for a great read, you want to do like a John Grisham, Michael Crichton kind of novel, it's really great. But the layers, the depth, the sort of reading between the lines, you're going to learn so much about how tech companies operate, from how the food is dispersed to how employee riots are stopped, what is happening behind the scenes at congressional hearings. I mean, it really, really, really runs the gamut to IPOs. All of that is in the book. So
it's centered in the truth of Silicon Valley, even though it's a company,
which is ironic because it's a novel, but it's the closest to truth that you're going to get about big tech.
Well, before you go, I said that I would ask you for, let's say, 3 movie recommendations and 3 TV recommendations, but I'll give you a chance to think about it because I want to just tell people what's coming up on our shows. We want to let you know that this coming Sunday on the New York Times Read Along, where I read the New York Times out loud like a crazy person, we've been doing that for 5+ years, is Daniel Jones, the editor of the Modern Love podcast, column, and TV show. So those of you who are fans of Modern Love, you will definitely want to tune in. It's 8:30 a.m. on Sunday, and it's in honor of Valentine's Day. So please tune in for that. And we have some other great episodes coming up, including with Elizabeth Becker and Ron Lieber, who is the money columnist for the New York Times. So this is Sunday at 8:30 a.m. And then at 11 a.m., we produce a show called She's on Call, which you can find on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. My team at Digimentors produces it. And again, for Valentine's Day, our surgeons, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian, are hosting Brioni Cole, who is a global speaker and creator of the Sex Tech School. And Justin Garcia is the executive director of the Kinsey Institute and scientific advisor to Match.com. So that should be an incredible show, 11 a.m. on Sunday. Please follow at She's on Call on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc., and on Instagram. So check that out. So let's get back to our friend Mark Luckie, who's now going to give us 3 movie recommendations and 3 TV recommendations.
Yeah, so the first movie that I recommend, like I said, I'm big in award shows. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is starring Viola Davis and the late Chadwick Boseman, just really electrifying performances around what it's like to create Black music in a white world. The second movie I'd recommend is Minari, Minari, which is a story about a Korean American family who is going through struggles. And I don't want to spoil much of it for you. And then I know everyone's Manira. Okay. Yes. I know everyone's talking about it, but they're talking about it for good reason, which is Bridgerton on Netflix. This sort of colorblind look at aristocracy is a lot of fun, and produced by Shonda Rhimes, who of course is behind Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder. And so in terms of TV, I'm going to flip
it. Sort of a big deal with Netflix, right? This was the first.
Yeah, it's incredible, right? It's historic. And so in terms of TV, I'm going to flip it around because we're in strange times, and I think we almost need like the comfort food version of television. And so for me, it's reality shows. So if you haven't watched Blown Away on Netflix, it's a competition for glass blowers, which you think that does, if you haven't seen it, you're like, what the heck? But it's actually really fun, really, really engaging. I'd recommend Great British Bake Off, all the seasons. Watch people make cakes and tarts that their mom taught them how to make. And then the third one that I recommend, I'm a big HGTV guy. So, gosh, why did I lose it? But the show with Chip and Joanna Gaines, they now have a new show on Discovery Network where they're turning people's homes in the Texas area, and it's really sort of manifesting our best way of living, watching HGTV and people's homes getting better. We all want our homes to be great, so why not watch vicariously through these shows? Yeah.
And you know something about homes because you've lived in so many different cities. You've moved around a lot. So you understand about that. Folks, our guest has been the great Mark Luckie, at Mark S. Luckie on all the platforms. Apollo saying hello from Montclair, New Jersey. Mark is former led media partnerships at Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit, and is an author, and his new book is called Valley Girls. Everybody check that out. And please check out his fabulous website, Get Luckie, LUCKIE.net. And we'll see you folks next time. Thank you so much. Please connect with Mark and with me on all the various platforms. And please share this right now with a friend. Tag a friend in any of the platforms, and they can watch it as soon as we're off the air, which is in just a second here. Thanks very much, everybody.